My wife looked me straight in the eye and said, "My friends aren't the problem. You are." I nodded. Okay. 3 weeks later, she was standing outside a lawyer's office, asking me why I hadn't fought harder for our marriage. But by then, the decision had already been made. The strange thing was that Sarah genuinely believed she was right. Even at the end. Even after everything. She thought our marriage was falling apart because I was too controlling, too demanding, too serious. At least that's what her friends kept telling her. And she believed every word. The argument started on a Friday night. I had spent the entire week traveling for work. 12-hour days. Hotels. Airports. Meetings. I got home around 6. Sarah wasn't there. No message. No call. Nothing. At 8 o'clock, I finally texted, "Everything okay?" An hour later, she replied, "Out with friends." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just 3 words. At 11, she came home laughing. Melissa and Rachel walked her to the door. All 3 looked annoyed when they saw me sitting in the living room. Melissa immediately rolled her eyes. "Wow, someone's waiting up." Sarah laughed. That bothered me more than it should have. The next morning I tried having a normal conversation. I would have appreciated a message. Sarah sighed. "Seriously, I'm not angry. Then why are we talking about it?" I looked at her. "Because we're married." Melissa happened to be in the kitchen. Again. She practically lived at our house. She grabbed a coffee and said, "Married doesn't mean owned." Sarah smirked. The conversation ended right there. That should have been my warning. But I ignored it. Like I ignored every other warning. A month later, things got worse. Every weekend became girls' night. Then girls' weekends. Then spontaneous trips. Meanwhile, every concern became proof that I was supposedly controlling. One evening, I asked if she wanted to spend Saturday together. She looked annoyed. I already made plans. What plans? Why does it matter? I stared at her. That's your answer. She shrugged. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Acting like my father. Melissa burst out laughing. The comment hit harder than she realized. Not because it was insulting. Because Sarah looked proud after saying it. As if disrespect had become entertainment. A few weeks later, we attended Rachel's birthday party. That was the night everything changed. About 20 people were there. Most of them were Sarah's friends. The conversation somehow turned toward relationships. Someone jokingly asked who wore the pants in each marriage. Before I could answer, Sarah pointed at me. Definitely not him. The group laughed. Then she added, "Honestly, if I waited for him to make decisions, we'd still be choosing paint colors from 3 years ago." More laughter. I forced a smile. Then Rachel joined in. "Oh, come on, Sarah. We all know you're the one carrying that marriage." The room exploded. People laughed, cheered, raised drinks. And Sarah didn't defend me. She laughed too. That moment stayed with me. Not because strangers mocked me. Because my wife enjoyed it. On the drive home, I stayed quiet. Sarah noticed. "You're upset." "No. You obviously are." I looked out the window. "It's fine." She rolled her eyes. "You need thicker skin." That sentence replayed in my head all night. You need thicker skin. Not sorry. Not I shouldn't have said that. Just another reason why I was supposedly the problem. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Every disagreement somehow involved Melissa. Every major decision involved Rachel. Every complaint Sarah had about our marriage somehow appeared in her friend group first, then came back to me later. It felt like I was married to a committee, not a person. One night, I walked into the living room unexpectedly. Sarah immediately locked her phone. That caught my attention. What? Nothing. She stood up too quickly. Definitely something. I didn't push, but later that night my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. One screenshot. The screenshot showed a group chat. Sarah, Melissa, Rachel, and several others. The message at the top made my stomach tighten. Sarah had written, "Don't worry. If he complains again, I'll just tell him he's insecure. Works every time." And underneath, it were dozens of laughing emojis. I stared at the screenshot for a long time. Not because it surprised me, because it confirmed something I had been feeling for months. Every argument, every accusation, every time Sarah called me insecure. It wasn't spontaneous. It was rehearsed. The next morning, she acted completely normal. Making coffee, scrolling through her phone, talking about weekend plans, as if I hadn't spent half the night staring at proof that my marriage had become a joke inside her friend group. I didn't mention the screenshot. Not yet. Instead, I watched. And the more I watched, the more obvious everything became. 3 days later, Sarah announced another girls' trip. Nashville. 4 days. Leaving the following week. I already booked everything, she said. I looked up from my laptop. You didn't ask me. Her expression changed immediately. There it was. The familiar irritation. The same irritation she showed whenever I expected basic communication. I don't need permission. I didn't say you did. Then what's the problem? I nodded. Okay. That answer seemed to bother her. She wanted an argument. She didn't get one. That weekend, her mother came over for dinner. Unfortunately, she wasn't any better than the friends. Halfway through the meal, she smiled at Sarah and said, "I'm glad you're finally living your own life." Sarah laughed. "I know." Then her mother looked at me. "For years, you've been too dependent on each other." I almost laughed. I was working 60-hour weeks, paying most of the bills, handling nearly every responsibility in the house. Yet somehow, I was the dependent one. Sarah didn't correct her. She simply nodded along. Another small moment. Another small cut. Another reminder. The following week, Sarah left for Nashville. The first day was normal. The second day felt strange. Messages became shorter. Responses became slower. Calls stopped entirely. Then something happened. Friday evening, my friend Mark sent me a photo. Not because he was spying, because he happened to be there. A business conference had brought him to Nashville. The photo showed a rooftop bar. Dozens of people. Music. Drinks. And Sarah, standing with her friends. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing scandalous. But one detail caught my attention. She had told me they were spending the evening at a spa. Not a rooftop bar. A lie. A small one. But still a lie. When I asked about it later, she immediately became defensive. "Why are you tracking me?" "I'm not." "Then why do you have pictures?" "A friend sent them." Her face tightened. "So now your friends are spying on me." I simply stared at her. The issue wasn't the bar. The issue was the lie. But somehow, I ended up defending myself again. That was when something finally clicked. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Concern. Deflection. Accusation. Blame. Repeat. A few days later, I made another attempt. Maybe my third or fourth serious conversation in 6 months. We sat in the kitchen after dinner. I kept my voice calm. "I don't think we're doing well." Sarah sighed dramatically. "Here we go. I'm serious. You always are. I feel like you're friends, are becoming more important than our marriage. She laughed, actually laughed, then shook her head. That's ridiculous. Is it? Yes. I waited. She crossed her arms. You just don't like that I have a life outside of you. There it was again. Not discussion. Not understanding. Just another accusation. Another way to avoid responsibility. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not out of anger. Out of exhaustion. 2 weeks later, things got even worse. Rachel hosted a huge summer party. Nearly everyone from Sarah's friend group attended. I almost didn't go. But Sarah insisted. You need to socialize more. The irony wasn't lost on me. For most of the evening, I kept to myself. Then came the moment I still remember. The moment that hurt more than any screenshot. More than any lie. More than any argument. Someone asked Sarah what made her happiest lately. Without hesitation, she smiled and said, honestly, time away from relationship drama. Several people laughed. Then Melissa added, you seem happier every time you're away from him. The entire group laughed again. I stood less than 10 feet away, close enough to hear every word, close enough for Sarah to know I heard it. She never corrected them, never defended me, never looked uncomfortable. She simply smiled and took another sip of her drink. That was the moment. Not anger, not heartbreak, clarity. For months, I had been trying to save a marriage. Meanwhile, my wife was treating me like a punchline. The next morning, I stopped trying. No announcement. No threats. No speeches. I simply stopped. Stopped initiating conversations. Stopped explaining myself. Stopped defending myself. Stopped chasing. At first, Sarah seemed relieved. Then confused. Then irritated. A week later, she confronted me. Why are you acting weird? I'm not. You're distant. Okay. She stared at me. What does that even mean? It means I heard you. The silence felt different. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Then came the ultimatum. The sentence she clearly expected would scare me. If you're this unhappy, she said, maybe we shouldn't be married. I looked directly at her. Years earlier, I would have argued, begged, negotiated. Not this time. I nodded. Okay. Her face immediately changed. The confidence disappeared. The certainty disappeared. For the first time, she looked worried. The next morning, while Sarah was at work, I made one call. An attorney answered on the second ring. 3 days later, divorce papers were drafted. And 1 week later, Sarah came home to find them waiting on the kitchen table. Sarah stood in the kitchen, holding the divorce papers. For several seconds, she didn't say anything. She just stared at the first page. Then the second. Then back at me. Finally, she laughed. Not because she found it funny. Because she thought it had to be a bluff. Very funny. I said nothing. Her smile faded. Wait, you're serious? Yes. The room went silent. For the first time in years, Sarah looked genuinely shocked. Not angry. Not annoyed. Shocked. As if the possibility had never crossed her mind. As if she truly believed I would tolerate anything as long as she pushed hard enough. That night, she called Melissa. Then Rachel. Then her mother. I could hear fragments of conversations from the other room. He actually filed. No, I'm serious. I thought he was just upset. The next morning, Sarah tried a different approach. She sat across from me at breakfast. We can work this out. I looked up. Okay. She blinked. That's not what I mean. I returned to my coffee. For months, she had ignored every attempt at fixing things. Now she wanted urgency. Now she wanted effort. Now she wanted communication. The timing wasn't lost on me. 3 days later, she asked if we could go to counseling. A few months earlier, I would have agreed immediately. This time, I simply said, I don't think that will help. For the first time, tears appeared. Not dramatic tears, real ones, because she was beginning to understand something. The problem wasn't the divorce papers. The problem was that I had already emotionally left the fight, and there was no way to reverse that overnight. A week later, karma, wave one arrived. The separation became official. I moved into a smaller townhouse across town. Quiet neighborhood. Small backyard. Peaceful. Meanwhile, Sarah stayed in the house. At first, she seemed confident. According to mutual friends, she told everyone she needed time. Space. Freedom. The same words she had been using for over a year. But freedom felt different when nobody was waiting at home anymore. The first month passed quickly. Then something changed. Melissa stopped showing up as often. Rachel became busy. Weekend trips became less frequent. The endless support Sarah had relied on slowly started disappearing. Not because anyone was cruel, because people have their own lives. And eventually, everyone goes home. That's when karma wave 2 began. One afternoon, I ran into an old mutual friend named Kevin. We grabbed coffee. During the conversation, he casually mentioned something. Honestly, most people thought you two would work things out. I nodded. Then he added, a lot of people were surprised by how Sarah treated you near the end. That caught my attention. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Because for over a year, I had felt invisible. Now I was discovering that not everyone had been blind. Some people had noticed. They simply hadn't said anything. A few weeks later, Sarah texted me. The message was short. Can we talk? I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop. She arrived early. The confidence she used to carry was gone. The woman sitting across from me looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. I think I made a mistake. I remained quiet. She looked down at her coffee. Melissa said I needed to stop letting people control my life. I nodded. Sarah gave a small laugh. The kind people make when they're disappointed in themselves. The funny part is, you weren't controlling me. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she continued. I kept choosing everyone else's opinion over my own marriage. There it was. The truth. Simple. Painful. Late. She wiped her eyes. I honestly thought you'd never leave. Hearing her say it out loud felt strange. Because that belief had been the foundation of everything. Every joke. Every dismissal. Every public humiliation. Every crossed boundary. Every disrespectful comment. She thought there would never be consequences. She thought I would always stay. No matter what. She stared out the window. I thought you'd fight harder. I shook my head. I did. Her eyes filled immediately. Because she finally understood. The fight wasn't the divorce. The fight had been all the conversations before it. The patience. The understanding. The second chances. The attempts to reconnect. The attempts to communicate. The attempts to save something that only one person was protecting. Once those failed, there wasn't much left. We talked for another 20 minutes. No arguments. No accusations. No blame. Just honesty. For the first time in a very long time. And we stood to leave. She asked one final question. Is there any chance? I thought carefully before answering. Then said, no. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew. As if she had known the answer before asking. We walked out together, then headed in opposite directions. That was the last conversation we ever had. Karma wave 3 came months later. Not in the form of money. Not in the form of public embarrassment. Not in the form of revenge. It came as realization. The kind that arrives when the noise disappears. When friends go home. When advice stops coming. When distractions fade. And you're left alone with your choices. Meanwhile, my life became simpler. Quieter. Better. Not perfect. Just peaceful. No more defending myself. No more trying to convince someone to respect me. No more competing with a group chat for my own marriage. The marriage didn't end because of one argument, or one friend, or one bad decision. It ended because every time our relationship stood on one side of the scale and her friends stood on the other, she chose them. Eventually, I stopped asking her to choose differently. And once I stopped chasing someone who had already stopped protecting the marriage, peace arrived on its own.